So, welcome to, I can never remember if it's witches, writer. Okay. Well, welcome back. Welcome back to Witches, Writers, and Shrinks. Yes, with an Oxford comma. Harold, someone in your comment section on Facebook was excited that I had an Oxford comma.
Probably me.
It was someone else too then.
Okay.
It was you and a small fantastic club. All right, so I am so happy to welcome back Mr. Harold Roth. And we are going to talk about, and this is part two. I will put the link below if you missed part one. This is part two
Okay.
of an extended conversation with Harold. And we're going to talk about his brand new book. Now, when did this come out? It's out of pre-order. It's in the world. So,
It's
oh,
it just came out this December 2024.
okay. Can people see this? Yes, they can.
Yeah.
With all my little notes and stickies. Okay. It's published by Wiser Books. Now, before we get started, actually about me, if anyone wants to find out like who the hell I am, what I'm what I'm doing here, what I'm up to, just look in the description box and I'll put my stuff there and also put Harold's stuff there. I'm not going to read you my own bio. I'm going to read to you actually from the back of Harold's book so you can know in case you don't already know who he is and why we're talking to him. Harold Roth is an author and artist and among the foremost authorities on plants within the modern occult community. He has studied Hebrew as well as Jewish mysticism and magic for decades. The author of The Magic of the Sword of Moses is his second book, and The Witching Herbs, his first book. Harold teaches classes on botanical magic, Kabbalah, and witchcraft. His site is haroldroth.com. And, I am going to change the view on this. Let's see. And yeah, all that information will be below in the description. So, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. Because last time we talked mostly about your second book, and I
Uh-huh.
knew I knew that I wanted to have you here to talk about this. This is intense. As a reader who didn't know anything about the Book of Enoch, this was eye-opening and intense, and I've got some intense questions for you, just like
Okay.
last time. So you ready?
Yep.
All right. So this, first of all, my experience as a reader is this, it's a history book. It was a history book for me, meaning it is packed. The Book of Enoch is packed with research, information, and I thought to myself, I was remembering, I mean, I know you're a Scorpio, and I was remembering, I think Harold is a Gemini rising. This felt,
Yes.
it
I checked
was
it the other day when you brought it up. I think it was you who said
probably,
people with Gemini. Oh no, it was a meme. Somebody said, maybe it was your meme. Somebody said Scorpios and Geminis are the worst. And if you're a Scorpio and you have Gemini rising, you're really bad.
that wasn't me. That wasn't me. I love Scorpio and I love Gemini. So I would never put them down, even jokingly in a meme. But it is a really interesting combination because we talk about Scorpio being so intense, right? And the laser, I mean, I can see just how you look at me through the camera. It's like, it's laser focus, it's intense. But then the Gemini rising, I think, is in part what creates such a book. So, I mean, Wiser is not an academic press, but this is scholarly. This is a scholarly work. There's a glossary, there's notes, there's the bibliography. Like, I want people to know that they're going to learn. And I don't mean that to scare them, but you want to, it is a journey. You want to jump into I mean, it's in the title, the forbidden knowledge, knowing like, okay, this is not a sound bite. It's not a list. It's not a meme. It's not what we've come to associate with some of the pitfalls of social media, like oversimplification. Like, you don't
Mhm.
dumb down. That's what I'm
No.
trying to say. This book does not dumb down. It is scholarly. I mean, there's ancient Jewish history, There's the background of the Book of Enoch itself, the Merkava, all these spiritual practices that people are really interested in. Rose's book to me, well, it is more practical. Like
Uh-huh.
there's the spells. So I just wonder if you could speak to your process as a writer, as a researcher with the Book of Enoch.
Yep. One of the differences between the Sword of Moses and the book that I wrote about the Sword of Moses and the Book of Enoch that I wrote uh, is that there wasn't a lot of scholarship on the Sword of Moses. You know, there was a few big globs, but there weren't, not that many people had studied it, and pretty much nobody in the cult world. Then, in contrast, the Book of Enoch is so popular and has been for a long time that there was tons of stuff. And I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I knew it was a thing. I knew the story about the Watchers, right? Just from being in the world.
Yeah.
But I wanted to have control over its history, its context, who might have written it, why, and all that other stuff. And there was tons of research. And I ended up reading about 200 different articles
Oh, wow.
about this. And then each one I take notes on. Then, when I'm ready to write, when I'm finished reading and I'm ready to write, then I start taking bits of the notes out, using that as part of an outline, finding the different groups of info. I mean, I'm sure you know what that's like. And then putting them in some kind of order that is digestible. Plus, my editor really helped by saying, okay, everybody doesn't know who the Zadokites are. Okay.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. And most people, or even a lot of figures from history, like,
Right.
oh, I forget who was Alexander the Great. Okay. And so that was good for me because that made me more aware of, okay, she said explain more. And since I was right in the middle of it, sometimes it's kind of hard to step back and say, what does a reader coming into this book know? Or what can I depend on them to know? What kind of, and I thought, well, most people aren't going to know that much about this. And I could only talk back to some of the perspectives that I knew were out there about the book, and not in the academic world at all, just in popular culture. So it was kind of a dance between trying to be historical and accurate, even if that flew in the face of a lot of ideas
Right.
or politics. But then I also wanted to deal with the pop culture aspect to a certain extent. I didn't give it a lot of attention, more in the end, towards the end of the book. So that was basically how I did it. And I always try just like, okay, write up all your stuff, and then do one rough draft from that, turn it in, okay, and let them talk back.
Hmm.
And that works really well for me.
That's
Now,
that's
a
good
huge,
advice for writers, for
yeah,
aspiring
because
writers or
I know for me, I tend to get all bogged down in editing. It's hard for me to stop. So if I make myself not go any further than just the first rough draft has to be the one that goes, uh, then I can come back when they give their, you know, whatever reactions, changes, requests,
right.
then I can deal with that.
Do you tend to over edit? You said you get bogged down. Does that mean that you're
Yeah.
cutting,
Yeah,
cutting,
I go
cutting?
back and then.
Yes. I suffer from that. And I try, I mean, I have a book coming out next year. So
Uh-huh.
I tried to keep that in mind. Like there's other people in this process and they're gonna say things. So
Yeah.
to try
And
to,
plus, I think that for me, when I edit too much, I kind of lose the plot. I kind of don't see the the big issues anymore. I get bogged down in little sentences.
Right. You know, back to you being Gemini rising, that is a stereotype or what one thing they say about Gemini. I'm not saying if it's true or not because I don't want to offend
Uh-huh.
any Gemini or Gemini risings here, but they say, astrologers say, Gemini is going to just see what's right in front of it, what's right in front of its
Ah.
face. So, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I have a lot of Virgo in my chart, not much Gemini, but we do that same thing. We see the trees, or
Uh-huh.
we see a piece of fruit on the tree,
Uh-huh.
like with the Oxford comma. I can obsess about a comma,
Oh yeah, me
you
too.
know, for half a day easily. What about that comma? Where does it
Yeah, and
go?
if somebody says, if one of the editors like takes a comma out that I think should be there,
Yeah.
I'll put it back.
It's upsetting, right? It's
Yeah,
kind of
it is.
like don't they know? Don't
Yeah,
they know what this means to the work? Yeah,
I know.
it's
It feels so important.
and it is. It
It
is.
is to me, but I think for most people, they don't even see them, you
But
know.
you know what? You know what? It's the music. It's the music.
It
The
is.
commas, I mean, if the commas aren't in the right place, it's not going to sound like you. You know, it's not going to sound like Harold. When you read it
That's
out loud,
right.
it's going to sound like someone else. Anyway, so we could talk about commas all day long. But do you have a preference? Like, so Sword of Moses, not much research. It's a different book. It's a different book. It's a different style of writing and reading. Is there one that's more pleasurable to you?
Well, I really enjoy researching. And one thing fun about the Sword of Moses for me, even though there wasn't a lot of academic articles about it, there was a book that mentioned it. It had some chapters. There was a monograph by the guy who did the new translation. But then the really fun part for me, although fun maybe should be put in quotation marks, was looking at the 1500 manuscript, a manuscript in Geneva that was written in 1500 by a guy who just wanted to have a copy for himself. And it's not like illustrated or fancy, but
Hmm.
the handwriting is really clear and the copies are really clear, and that was really fun to look at, to know you're reading something that somebody wrote in, almost 500 years ago. It just was really cool. It
Yeah.
just gave me this feeling of being this gnome, uh, copying, or yeah, I mean, because that's where I got all the divine names, because the translator did not translate the divine names. Somebody actually criticized my book on Amazon, saying that I had gotten some of the divine names wrong. But the thing, and he checked them, or they checked them on the original translation, but the translation doesn't have the divine names. He
Hmm.
just didn't want to do them. He just thought it was not relevant and was a pain in his ass. So he didn't do it.
Hmm. And you
So,
know, I mean,
anyways,
if you read the book, you know how essential that is, the
yeah,
divine names. So you
yeah.
mean that they didn't want to
The
say them?
translator didn't want to
Oh,
put it in his translation.
oh
Yeah, he
wow, okay.
he just sort of would insert things like 35 divine names here.
Okay, that is nuts to me because I've been reading. I'm not done with Book of Enoch yet, and I feel a little bit like I'm cheating on this book because
Mm.
I've been reading both at once and I've been doing a spell work class through December and using things from your Sword of Moses book.
Oh,
So
cool.
I've learned a bit about the Sword of Moses, the divine names, Jewish magic, and I'm understanding how important these are. So
Yeah, it's like the whole thing.
to not put them in is like it's a little mashugana. Dare we
And
say.
right away the person who did that does not practice magic.
So I was a little torn whether to ask you to give us like the tiniest like what is the Book of Enoch and why does it matter? versus reading the back of the book. Um, what
Oh,
would
I
you
can tell you.
prefer?
Hmm?
What? You
I
want to
can,
tell us?
yeah.
Like imagine someone and this was me until I read it, who like I had never not only or maybe I had heard of it just in the tiniest way. But once I got into reading it, I had no idea that it had anything to do with the flood. So that really interests me, the story of Noah. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, tell us, give us the cliff of the cliff of the cliff of the cliff notes
Okay.
version for
I will do my best.
for
Uh,
those people.
it was written, the oldest parts, it's got 5 parts that were separate books, and probably the one that's most important to us, the Book of the Watchers, was probably 2 books at some point. There's definitely 2 storylines in there. And that one and the astronomical book, which is the oldest part, they're both written maybe around 300 BCE. So pretty old. And then the rest of them up until about 100 BC. Although some people think that the very last book, which is very was very attractive to Christians because it talks about a kind of a Messiah figure, that might have been written in the 1st century CE. So we got this span, but the main story that we hear is about a band of angels who looked down from heaven. They saw women. They were attracted to them. They left their posts as guides for stars, and they went down there and they had sex with the women, and those women gave birth to these critters, the Nephilim,
Critters.
who are giants in all the different ways there are to be giants. And but they were very destructive, and they raped and killed people and animals, and uh, practiced cannibal. They ate other Nephilim, and they just were really bad. And after a while, God was prodded by the archangels that stayed up in heaven to do something about this. And what he did was say, okay, uh, I'm just going to make a flood and get rid of you all.
Why
And
not?
yeah, really, just like a kid knocking over the things on the game board. But uh, it does talk about that, and the Enoch is really not in the Book of the Watchers at all.
Right.
He's in the later parts more, and he goes up to they ask him to go to heaven and ask God if they can be forgiven for being jerks, and God says no. And so and in the meanwhile, they Enoch learns all these different things from the angels. The stuff that the Watchers brought down to earth and shared with human beings besides themselves were things like making pacts,
Hmm.
curse work, astrology.
Metalworking, right?
Yes,
Oh,
metalworking.
that was
And
so interesting. Like, what's considered forbidden?
yeah,
Forbidden, like all of this was forbidden knowledge, and what that meant, what that means.
I think part of what it meant is that the stuff that the Watchers taught humans was came off as seeming paganistic,
Mm,
even though the Watchers were angels. And Enoch learned all the same fields of, well, probably not curse work, okay,
right.
but most of everything the Watchers taught, Enoch learned. But Enoch was taught by angels who were still up in heaven. So you know, it's clear that the idea is that you can learn these things through divine means, but not through other means. And some people think that's the shot at the Babylonian exorcist priests, because all the things that the Watchers know, like how to tell the future from thunderstorm sounds or from the wind or lava or the movements of the earth, things like that. A lot of omens and
Mhm.
divination stuff. Plus, of course, like you said, metalwork. And that's why it seems kind of like two separate stories there, because the one is all this stuff about divination and magic. And the other guy is all about, hey, let me show you how to make spears and armor, jewelry.
And
Uh,
they're, I think you make this point is that they're both weapons, which then goes back to the sword of Moses being words.
that's true. That's true.
You know, it, as you're talking now, I'm struck by the fact that divination is really, really old.
Yeah.
Divination, and I don't know if you are a diviner at this time. I mean, I know I don't know. I don't know the sum and substance of your work all these years, but it's something that I've done for a long time as an astrologer, as a tarot reader, and
Uh
now
huh.
without any tools because you do it long enough and you don't need the things anymore for many
Uh huh.
people. There's just a refined knowing that you can tap into and just thinking like, okay, this really does connect us, those of us who do this work seriously, connects us to way back,
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. I especially thought learning the signs of thunder, the different,
Mm.
I thought that was really cool. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I have, or lava. The
Right.
same- Which
Doesn't happen every day.
I probably won't get that chance in New York City, but perhaps, you know, will my train come on time?
Oh, that's one way of
You know,
thunder.
that's true. That's true. It can get very loud down there. Okay, I interrupted you with that thought though. Is there more that you want to share about the book itself? More details to.
I think, well, one thing that I would say is that the one of the main things the book strikes at is where did evil come from?
Yes, I love that. I have a list. I have a list.
Cool.
Okay. All right, go because all right, let me I was going to say I'll interrupt you again later, but let me
Cool.
interrupt you now because I had a list of themes that were so fascinating to me about the book, the origin of evil, the nature of angels, and I asked you about that in our first chat. What are angels? You know, according to Jewish tradition versus others, the nature of angels, nature of forbidden knowledge, relationships between angels and I mean, this friends, this is a spicy book. This evil, forbidden relationships, forbidden knowledge. It's the book of Enoch is spicy.
In contrast to the Adam and Eve story, which says that evil is direct result of people, okay, doing something bad.
Yeah.
And if you notice, they don't do anything bad until they eat from the fruit. Well, of course, that's disobeying God. But once they eat, then they have this knowledge and then they have sex, right? Just the opposite for the book of Enoch. The angels come down and it's the decision to leave their posts. That
Mhm.
seems to be the main thing that's offensive to God.
Mm.
And that they want something that they are not, because there's a lot of stuff about not mixing in there, not mixing separate categories, which I think you know is probably it's very important in Judaism. You don't mix meat
Yes.
and milk or linen and wool, all these different things you don't mix. Um, and they they're since they were angels, they weren't supposed to be having children, had no reason to have children. Um, and they didn't even have genitalia according to the story. They had to create them,
Wow.
but they're the ones who bring evil to earth,
Mm.
and their gifts cause more evil. Like the, of course, you know, the weapons, the armor, metalworking, um, you know, that results in wars and killing and stuff. And of course, the Nephilim use swords and everything. But the other part that doesn't get expanded until a little later in the book is that the same angel Azrael brings the silver working and making jewelry and making makeup and dyes weirdly enough, these are like all the alchemical gifts,
Right.
but
Do you see the Book of Enoch as a cautionary tale? Because I think it was even just when I was into the introduction, I thought to myself, this is a story of desire. This is what happens when, or this is what the authors are trying to say. When desire is in charge, really bad stuff, really bad stuff leading to the divine destroying the world is going to happen. So how do you view it? Not how did the authors view it, but how did
mhm.
what's
I
your
see it more
take?
like having, I do agree that desire is at the heart of the decision that Watchers made to go down to Earth. But that's also about disorder. And it
Mm,
seems like chaos is associated with sin or wrongdoing in this book. And that it was probably important in ancient in at least some strands of ancient Judaism, the idea of order and keeping things separate.
right.
Um, and then if you don't do that, you have chaos. And the good example of that is the whole fuss about the calendar. That's a book in there, the astrological book, is a lot of stuff about the calendar, which before Jews were exiled to Babylon was a solar calendar, which meant that every single festival was always on the same exact day of the year.
Right.
Whereas when we were exiled to Babylon, we took up their lunar calendar, and that means that that those are movable.
Mhm.
And so that is seen, well, even Isaiah, and he says a lot of bad shit about, what you messed up our calendar, and how repellent that is because it's a foreign calendar and one that's dedicated to different gods.
Right.
So I think that whole thing about chaos and order is real important to it.
Can you speak to, I mean, we're talking about desire being foundational to this book, foundational theme. Can you speak to the desire of the divine?
Well, one thing is kind of disappointing about this is that God doesn't seem to be that interested. It's always the angels who,
Interested in us
yeah,
humans?
and in what we're
Okay.
doing. Yeah, because like here are the Nephilim, they've killed all the human beings, okay? Raped and killed all the human beings, raped and killed most of the animals. The earth, the blood is crying out to heaven, okay?
Hmm.
And the archangels are like, what? Why isn't God doing anything about this? And they go to God and they say, can't you see what's going on? And God says, oh, yeah, okay.
That's like a
You know,
disinterested parent,
yeah. And then all
disinterested
of a
teacher.
sudden, okay, well, then I'm just going to destroy it. And the only people that are going to be left is Noah and his family. It just sounds like a Victorian dad,
Mm,
not he wasn't paying attention. Somebody else had to. And, I guess you could say, well, the angels, these archangels, I think it's Raphael and somebody else, Michael, maybe.
mhm.
These archangels are, maybe you could say they're like goody two shoes. They didn't go down to earth, they followed the rules. But on the other
Mm,
hand, they're also higher up than the watchers. So I don't know. It's kind of, but to me, that was really almost comical. You know, here's God's omnipotent and omniscient, and
right.
yet God's not paying attention to. I mean, maybe he just got disgusted with us and quit paying attention for that reason.
I feel like this opens up so many questions and thoughts because I feel a lot of us are feeling this today. I mean, this is an old question. Where is God?
That's right.
Where is God? And
And
I
who
read
made evil?
and who made evil. Yes, there's questions for the ages. That one I actually who made evil I never actually thought about. I must have been reading the wrong things. But that question never entered my mind. But the where is God question often does and has
Yeah.
perplexed humans, I think, forever.
Yeah, I do
So
think that this book makes the point that God made evil. Evil came from
mhm,
heaven, first in the form of the Watchers, but then later in the story, after the Nephilim were going to all be killed. Okay.
mhm.
Um, this head of the Nephilim goes to God and says, well, what about how about you let 10% of the
I
spirits?
I remember that, and you had an exact number. Was that it? Was
Yeah,
it
it
the
was
percentage?
10%.
I remember reading that and laughing and being like, this is
Yeah,
so
I know.
exact.
And it's right
10%.
in the book.
Oh my God.
And
And he says yes. I mean,
yes, he does.
God says, okay, no
Yeah.
big after the world is a disaster, basically. So he calls on a disaster to deal with the disaster.
And these are also exactly the critters who later on in the book, after, well, it's after the flood. Yeah, it must be.
The 10%, the ones that
Yeah,
are
the 10%, these are the spirits of 10% of these are the spirits of 10% of the Nephilim. And their jobs go around and make people commit idolatry, right? But they obviously have side jobs because no
not just
Noah's, I think
gigs.
it's his grandson comes and says, please help me because my sons are being harassed by demons and they make them sick and I don't know what to do. So no Noah goes and trips around in heaven and finds out what to do. But it's like, so it's clearly that is happening because God let those spirits live, and that is the origin of demons, according to a lot of views in Judaism. I mean, some of them say no, there were demons on the before God created anything, and other people get really annoyed. How could God have created evil things? But I always thought that that was part of, and that was one of the things. There's no battle in heaven.
Mm,
There's no rebellion of the prideful angels in heaven. Although they could say they were prideful, but there's not this fight in heaven where there's a distinct separation and the angels get kicked out. Um, so it's more like, well, God made all of these beings. God made the angels. Anyways, it just, I think it locates the beginning of evil in a different place than
mm,
than the Adam and Eve story,
right, right.
because there's
That it
no,
was humans' fault.
yeah, it's very clear that it's human's fault there. On the other hand, the Adam and Eve
So it
story.
takes away original sin.
Oh yeah, there's
It's just
no,
gone.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's none.
I mean, I grew up. I want to say knowing that that's not part of our story. I mean,
Uh huh.
as Jewish people, that's not a Jewish story that we're born into sin, but still they did something bad. The
Uh
story
huh.
goes. They ate of the tree, now they're banished from the garden and the rest is history.
Right. I never really understood why kids would inherit that, but the whole thing about them eating the fruit and getting kicked out. If they hadn't have done that, there never would have been any history. There
No,
never
you
would have
too.
been any Sinai. There never would have been so many kids.
So it was a setup. So basically you're saying it was a setup. It was a setup.
Well, it was kind of, my interpretation has been, I've heard a few other people say this, that it was a setup, but just like the thing with Isaac and Abraham.
Yes. Also a
That,
setup.
yes. And that basically Abraham failed, but Adam and Eve succeeded because of their actions, history started. And humans became humans instead of God's little pets in this little playground.
Oh, so let me ask you this though. How was you said Abraham failed the test? How did Abraham did he fail the test because he didn't execute his son soon enough? You know, then there was time for the angel to speak to him. Like how did Abraham fail the test?
He failed it by being willing to kill his son.
Oh, by being so whose view is that though?
Different. Well, that was my rabbi's, you know. And
Okay.
I had already thought that there was something wrong with Abraham. I mean, here we're being shown these other groups of people at different points in the Hebrew Bible. We're shown people who pierce their kids through the fire, as they say, which is always,
Sacrifices.
huh?
Sacrifices, yes.
Yeah. And that's how that is always interpreted, although historically maybe they never did that.
Mhm.
But maybe they just pass them over the fire like pagans do, jump over the fire for certain holidays. But at any rate, I could see that that would be condemned, okay, putting your kids in a fire. So then why would God, think it was a good idea? I mean, it's almost like the story about Job. The devil
Yeah.
says, or the Satan says, "Oh God, let's just see how much this guy loves you, and gonna really give
Right.
him the business."
As a test, as in
Yes.
I'm thinking about how I mean I can't give you a source, but what's come down to me being among um, traditionally religious people today, and this is very rudimentary, cursory knowledge that Abraham actually passed the test because he was willing to sacrifice, because he got the call and he was like, okay. You know what? It's interesting. It reminds me when I first moved to Brooklyn many years ago, and I was staying with a friend and looking for a place to live. And I found this lady through some sort of local channel. And I can't remember if I signed an agreement. I was pretty naive. I mean, this was a long time ago, and I just handed her a bunch of money, like, okay, I'm going to rent this room from you, deposit. And I had no money, right? Like this was the end of my money. And it was a small community. Everybody kind of knows each other. I had given her, deposit, all that, probably first month's rent, last month's rent, something. And the husband of my friend said to me, no, 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 do not rent from her. And he gave me all these reasons, like this reputation, and said under no circumstances you cannot live with this person. He said try to get your money back. So I did. I tried to get my money back. I was only able to get a little bit of it back, but the point is, and these folks were from Yerushalayim, from Mea Shearim, I think, actually, for many, many, many generations. And as they wouldn't have called it Jewish magic. I call it Jewish magic. But as a I don't think segula would be the right word. I don't know what the right word would be. But to get out of this situation, to get out of this difficult position I found myself in, having to break this verbal contract and to see if I could get any money back. His wife told me to say the Akedah, which is that story of the sacrifice of Isaac. I think it was 7 times or 8 times every day
Huh.
until it was
Happened.
rectified. Yeah, yeah. Until
Uh-huh.
I mean, I was able to break the contract no
Well, I
problem,
guess
and I
it's a
probably
story
got
about averting a terrible result.
yeah. It made me associate to that this is but I mean, just like the sword of Moses makes use of the Amida,
Uh-huh.
I feel like, and again, like I'm not a scholar, I'm just someone who grew up Jewish, so immersed in different parts of this world. I feel like there's no part of our written life that doesn't have, there's probably a story, right? There's probably a story or a magical purpose for every single prayer,
Yep.
for every single Torah passage. Like there's going to be, besides all the layers that, like you talk a lot about the canon, the canonical books. There's there's more. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. There's I guess, well, folk magic.
Yeah.
I guess I would call that. Would you call that folk magic? Like her saying, okay, you need to recite this. This is the thing you need to recite. And I was like, wow, that is so freaking mystical. This is the place for me. I'm sold. Find me a husband. Let's do this.
That's cool. I love that. Yeah, we call that magic. I think
Yeah, yeah,
a
there's a
lot
lot of
of
magic.
the Haredi, that's what they do.
Yeah,
They might not call it that, but if you're from outside of that world,
yeah.
and that's one of the things that attracted me to them. But um, you know, there's so many other things about them that I don't like. So yeah,
It can be a mixed bag,
yeah, very,
but the mysticism is
yeah.
on point.
Well, yeah,
I have a few more questions if you're
sure,
up for it.
totally.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. Are are there angels today? Do angels still exist? According to Harold, or according to sources that you want to bring forward, and what are they there for? Or I feel like folks in my audience or my Patreon want to know, can they help us? Or is that just I don't know, a new age invention or a contemporary invention that angels are here to? So are there angels today?
Yes,
And
and yes,
and
they
they
can
can
help
help
us.
us. So is that
Yes,
all right? I'm going to be quiet and you give us a story on the angels.
they the well. Right now, I'm looking at Hecholot, which is a type of magic and mysticism, which on the one hand, you do all these things to prepare yourself to rise through the levels of heaven, get to the top one, and see the throne of God. And the other part, so that's kind of the mystical part, but it might be more like just a purification
to
thing.
see the throne of God.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this though: why? For what? Why? Like, why do we want to see the throne of God?
Well, usually they present it as for the hell of it, that it's like
Just
you
because
just
it's
want
cool.
to. Yeah, it's
So
cool.
it's like the Grand
It's,
Canyon, seeing the Grand Canyon or the Empire State Building. You'll see the
well,
throne of
I
God.
guess I'm making it sound silly, but it's really about you just want to do this to have this experience.
Okay.
You want to see God, and
Okay.
even though you might not really see God, you might just see something that kind of represents God,
Okay. So
like
it's
the
to get
chariot.
closer. It's like
Yeah,
to approximate some kind of union
but it's
experience.
also like this purification ceremony because you
Okay.
had to really purify yourself to be around angels in Jewish magic. Otherwise, they will kill you. So
Mm.
they are not the nicey, kind of angels that appear in other, they're fire spirits, you
I
know,
remember reading that, yes. And I forget which book, maybe both. You talk about that angels are
probably. And
fire
so,
spirits.
like, the other half of it is uh, uh, conjuring angels and asking them for boons.
Mhm.
And they are compelled to help you by the use of divine names and by the story that when Moses went up to Sinai to get the tablets, he entered into heaven to get, the message. And the angel said, what the hell are you doing here? I think I mentioned this before. You can't be here, you stink. And which is a very, I think, fairly common reaction of spirits the world over to human beings that we smell bad. So, but and God was just kind of hanging back watching this, right? But then Moses said, "Oh, really? Where are your parents that you can obey the mitzvot about honoring your father and mother? You
Mm.
can." The mitzvot is for human beings. And
Right.
that means that we are especially blessed by God and we're above you. And God said, yeah. So from now on, you angels have to obey human beings and help them when they adjure you, when they answer.
Okay. Okay. So
So,
that's where that comes
and
from
that
then.
doesn't come from like in Christian grimoires about compelling angels, for as far as I know, you usually can refer to Jesus and say, Jesus, or you can just say, I compel you to blah, 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 blah. But it's in Jewish angel magic, we're not compelling them. God is. So in
Mm.
that way, it's
That's
kind of
a
like a,
big
yeah,
difference. So it's not on us. It's not on us.
no. So it's not, you don't have to worry about it. It's not condemned. And a lot of people will say who don't know very much about Jewish magic, they will say, "Oh, you can't do that," because it says, "Now you cannot suffer a witch to live." Oh, to which
Right.
I always say, "Oh yeah, what about the witch of Endor?
Mm.
She didn't have to die."
Hmm.
And so like, but at any rate, there's only one type of magic, according to what I've read, that's forbidden in the Hebrew Bible. And it's based on this. It has the same root as the word for whisper. And apparently it was like a practice for healing. And people would, like whisper magical names, probably not divine names. I'm sure they weren't.
Hmm.
But for healing, and that's forbidden. And it's clearly because it has pagan associations, probably
Right.
Babylonian, I'm thinking. So, but there were rabbis all through our history who did magic,
So
and
this
nothing
is
bad happened to them.
this is good to know, especially for, and I know a lot of people like this who are um they're working on their courage. Or they
Mm-hmm.
might feel bad, they might feel like, oh, I can't tell an angel what to do. Like, no, 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 it's not on you. It's on God. They're compelled to help us because of the divine, like it lets us off the hook. You know what I'm saying? Like you probably know these folks that would feel like, I couldn't do that. Like it's
Yeah,
too,
they're very fearful,
it's too much.
too aggressive.
Yes, too aggressive. So I think this information would come as a relief to
I
some
think
some
so
people.
too. I mean, it
Yeah.
certainly did to me because I already knew about, well, what little I knew about angel magic was from Picatrix. And
Hmm.
I was like, I don't think I want to do that. You know,
Tell
sounded,
us why. I only know about Picatrix because of you, because of last time. So
oh,
I don't know.
it's an Arab magic book. I don't know when it was written. I'm not really good with the history of it, but you conjure these spirits that are angels basically, and there's a lot of props involved. There's a lot of stuff you have to do, but they are to me they were seem very ferocious. And I mean, it's kind of funny because these angels are also ferocious, but
Hmm.
mostly only when you're doing the ascent thing. When you're doing the ascent thing, uh, you have to use what they call seals, which are really just divine names. And as you go to each level of heaven, you show them these divine names, and it's like your get out of jail free card. You can just get in, okay, and go to the
Hmm.
next one. But at any rate, I got kind of off the topic. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Hmm.
So I guess I thought of the Picatrix angels, and I'd heard from people say that they were very dangerous to work with.
Okay. Okay.
But I guess, the, uh, and I don't even remember if there's a purification ritual in Picatrix, but there is purification, and it's not even that big of a deal. I mean, it's like anywhere from, I think it's 4 to 40 days fasting. You don't have to not eat anything. You only eat at night, just like Ramadan. And you do these other things, bathing, purification. It's not anything a person couldn't do.
Hmm.
So, and then you're good to go. You know, they aren't going to kill you for smelling
Thank God.
bad.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
What a relief. Okay. Got a couple more. So we're at about an hour. So, I mean, I will edit us down, but let me ask a couple more questions since your
Cool.
energy's up for it. Could you give us, besides your own books, a little reading list, maybe 3 or 4 books about Jewish magic or magic in general, your favorites?
Okay, probably one that a lot of people know is by Trachtenberg. And I
Oh
think
yeah, I
it's
just
called,
got that.
yeah, that's a good one, especially because they just updated it.
Mhm.
That's called Jewish, I think it's called Jewish Magic and Superstition. And that's like an encyclopedia. So that's really fun to tool around in. For ancient Jewish magic, there's a book by Gideon Bohak, Bohak. And he's an academic, but it's very easy to read compared to usual academic writings, especially. So there's that. Then there's Yuval Harari, Harari, Jewish Magic Before the Kabbalah. So
Mm,
that's all the ancient stuff. Doesn't
okay.
include the Kabbalah magic. And haven't really gotten into the Kabbalah magic.
That was my next question. If you
Yeah,
have,
I
because
mean,
I've only read what's his name, Aryeh Kaplan. I
oh
haven't
yeah, yeah, me
read a
too.
few of his.
I
That's
love
my
his
only.
book on meditation,
Hmm.
and I've used that. I tried the Abalafian method of you say the tetragrammaton, basically, and he had it created a system where it could insert all these different vowels so that sooner or later you'd end
You'll
up
hit on it.
like
Yeah.
monkeys typing. Uh, you'd end up saying it the right way, and that it was to get the gift of prophecy. But I wasn't
Okay.
able to continue with it; it was too hard. Um, but I had some satisfaction because I read that there were like very learned rabbis who couldn't do it either. It's like too hard.
And he seemed like a very interesting
Oh yeah.
character. Is there a book that you recommend for more information about Abulafia?
Well, there's several books by Moshe Idel, who is the IDEL, who is like a leading scholar on Kabbalah.
Mm.
And he really loves Abulafia. And I never am sure where the stress goes in that name. Is
Right.
it
I was fascinated by him from your and now I can't remember which book. It's in the Enoch book, right?
probably?
Now I can't remember, but I
I
was
can't remember either.
totally. So do you know Jeffrey Dennis's book? It's actually a Llewellyn book. I think it's called the Encyclopedia of Jewish Magic, something like
Oh
that.
no, I haven't seen that.
That's a really wonderful
Cool.
book that I've got. Yeah, which is encyclopedia. So I personally love those encyclopedias,
Uh-huh.
dictionaries where you can just thumb through. And also that Trachtenberg book, I can't remember if it's free or you have to pay for it, but it is on Audible.
Oh,
So for people who like to listen without
that's neat.
reading. Okay, so we got a reading list out of you. We got lots of Book of Enoch talk. I've got 2 more questions. Let's go for it.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by dedications in books. So I noticed that this book, Book of Enoch, was dedicated to the seekers. So I wondered what was behind that choice and what that means to you. And is Harold Roth a seeker?
Yeah, I'm definitely a seeker. But for me, I thought, well, it's called the forbidden knowledge, and I'm I'm hoping that people read the book because they wanted to learn more about forbidden knowledge as opposed to people who might want to say, that's forbidden, you should not do that, right? But so I think you have to be a real dedicated seeker, especially because even though a lot of stuff about magic is like out there, uh, most of it, well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of it is crap.
Yeah.
No, it's just not any good. Or there's the anticipation a lot of times that I've noticed that people have the idea they can just walk into some magical practice and become a master of it in like a month.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen this, especially about Jewish
Mm.
magic, but I'm sure it's about all the different kinds.
It's
Somebody
what
who doesn't
everybody wants.
know
Yeah.
Creole who gonna become a Mamba or whatever, I mean, or somebody that doesn't know Hebrew, not even
Yes.
the alphabet.
That would drive me crazy for years when I would see these folks on YouTube supposedly teaching Kabbalistic mysteries and they couldn't pronounce it, they couldn't write it. They
Right.
certainly didn't know. That was just
Yeah.
my irritation or
Well,
foreclosing.
I do think that the Book of Enoch appeals to people now for the same reason it did that. People were really scared then. With
Mm,
all of this social tumult, they were having the threats of the Romans, later, and then they were like, what's going to happen? And then there's the destruction of the temple. Now what are we going to do? And there's a lot of, in Enoch there's this whole story about the third temple is going to be in heaven or up in the sky. It's not going to be in Jerusalem, blah blah blah. So it's like a solution, and everybody's going to be sorted out, good and bad. So, like, I think that appeals. That same thing, not necessarily stuff about the temple, but just that things will be fixed. That we're in a very trying time now, and we don't have the answers. We don't know what's going to happen. We just feel scared, and
mm.
I think this addresses that.
I was thinking that too earlier. I forget what part of our conversation, but it felt like, oh, it's no different than today. When is the next flood coming? Or is it already here? Are we
Well,
in the
climate
midst?
change.
Yeah, in the midst of the flood.
Uh
So we just solved everything. Spiritually speaking, we just
huh.
all the answers right here, folks, at Witches, Writers, and Shrinks. We got it all for you. All right. So what's your so last time I asked you this question, you said the Hermit. So
Yeah.
is your favorite tarot card still the Hermit, or are you feeling
Yeah.
different
My
today?
second favorite is the mage.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Two
Because
major
it's
arcanas.
not to like, right? Just if
Exactly.
you're into magic,
What's not to
what's not
like?
what's not to like?
All the tools on the table.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up because it'll be a bear to edit. It's like because we could easily talk for like 3 hours. Like, I'm
Yeah.
still editing. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Harold, so much for visiting with us again. It has been
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. Thank you. No,
It
thank
was
you.
fun for me.
Oh, good. I'm so glad because that's what I want to do with my speaking of astrology, we were talking about astrology at the start. I have a very intense uh birth chart, very serious, very focused. Um so any chance that I can have fun, and this is fun for me. Any chance that I can have fun is like, yeah, let's do it. Let's have fun. Okay. Let me show his books again. The Witching Herbs, which we haven't really talked about yet, but we might. We might have to. That's the
Okay.
first one. They're all from Wiser books. Here's the second one. Is that in the frame? I can't tell.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then the brand new, hot off the press book of Enoch. So, as I was saying the first time, get the Harold Roth collection. It is not too late for your holiday gift giving plans to include Harold Roth. All right. I think we're good. I think that's all. Any last message you want to share with your fans, readers, future
Don't be
fans,
afraid
future
to try
readers?
magic.
Oh, I like that. Don't be afraid to try magic. Why not? Why not? What can I tell my students from this past month? Why shouldn't they be afraid? What's waiting for them on the other side?
Knowledge, power,
Mm,
and that means healing, at least in my opinion.
okay.
Your own healing and healing other people.
I'm convinced. If I weren't convinced, if I didn't already know it, I would be convinced. All
Well,
right.
that's good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you. It's been
and
great.